On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein died in Princeton Hospital. He had refused surgery. His last words were in German. The nurse did not speak German. No one will ever know what he said. Before his body was cremated, before his family knew what was happening, the pathologist who performed the autopsy removed Einstein's brain without permission. He photographed it, took it to a lab, and cut it into 240 pieces. For the next 50 years, the most important brain in human history sat in a cardboard box, in a closet, next to a gas station in Kansas. I need to tell you what they eventually found when they examined it. Because I knew Einstein. I was 22 years old the first time I stood in front of him. I watched something happen behind those eyes that I have never seen in any other human being. And when they finally cut his brain open and looked inside, what they found does not answer the question everyone thinks it answers. Because some things cannot be found under a microscope. And I think Einstein knew that. But before I can explain what they found, you need to understand what that brain did. Because without that, the discovery means nothing. So I am going to show you 3 things. First, I am going to tell you about the year that should not be possible. The year a 26-year-old patent clerk, with no lab, no funding, and no reputation, destroyed 300 years of physics. Then I am going to tell you how the same mind that did that spent the next 30 years failing. And finally, I am going to take you inside that brain and show you what the scientists saw when they put it under a microscope. And then I'm going to tell you why it scared me. I need to start with the moment I saw that mind working, because everything that comes after only makes sense if you understand what Einstein's brain could do when it was still alive. I was a graduate student at Princeton in 1940, 22 years old. I had been asked to present my work on a new theory of electromagnetism. I walked into the seminar room and saw the audience, von Neumann in the second row, Pauly next to him, and in the back, with his white hair and that sweater and those eyes that looked like they had already seen the answer to whatever you were about to say, was Einstein. My face turned green. I could feel the blood leave my head. But I gave the talk, and when I was done, Pauly stood up immediately and attacked. He said he did not think the theory could be right. Then he turned to Einstein and asked him to agree. And Einstein said, no. A long, slow German no. He did not agree with Pauly. He told the room that he found it difficult to see how this would work for gravity. But he was not dismissing it. He was tolerant of new ideas. He was generous to a 22-year-old kid who had no business being in that room. Now here is what you need to understand. By 1940, Einstein was already isolated. The revolution he had helped start, quantum mechanics, had moved past him. My generation was building on his foundations, but in directions he refused to follow. He did not accept that the universe was random at its core. He spent years arguing with Niels Bohr about this. God does not play dice, he said. Most physicists thought Einstein was stuck, a relic, a man whose best work was behind him. I did not feel that way, because I had seen those eyes. Whatever was happening inside that mind, it was not confusion. Einstein was not lost. He was looking at something the rest of us could not see. And that is the question that would follow his brain for the next 70 years. Was Einstein seeing something real? Or was he staring into nothing? Keep that question in your mind, because everything in this story comes back to it. Now, the year 1905. I need you to understand how impossible this was, because without that, the brain discovery later means nothing. Einstein was 26. No university would hire him. He applied for academic positions and was rejected. He was working as a technical expert, third class, at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, stamping patent applications 6 days a week for a modest salary. He had almost no access to scientific journals. His closest intellectual companion was a friend, Michel Bissot, who worked at the same office. He had a small circle of friends he debated physics with, but no laboratory, no research team, no institutional support. That was the foundation behind what happened next. In March, Einstein published a paper that said every physicist alive was wrong about light. Light is not a wave, it is made of particles. Quanta. This was so radical that scientists refused to accept it for 20 years. He would win the Nobel Prize for this paper alone, but he was not finished. Not even close. In May, while the physics world was still processing the first paper, he published a second one. This one proved that atoms exist, not theorized. Centuries of debate settled by a patent clerk. And remember, while he was writing these papers, he was also a new father. His son Hans Albert had been born the year before. Einstein was changing diapers and rewriting the universe at the same time. In June came the third paper, Special Relativity. Time is not constant. Space is not fixed. Nothing is what Newton said it was. 300 years of physics overturned in a single paper. And then in September, almost as an afterthought, a 3-page paper, E equals mc squared. Energy and mass are the same thing. 4 papers, 1 year, a patent office. Let me make sure you feel what that means. Any single one of those papers would be the crowning achievement of an entire career in physics. Einstein did all 4 before his 27th birthday, from a desk where he stamped inventions from other people. I have been around genius my whole life. I watched von Neumann calculate faster than a machine. I heard Dirac find music in mathematics that no one else could hear. But no one has done what Einstein did in 1905. Not before, not since. And from that year forward, one question haunted every scientist who studied the mind. What is inside that brain? What is physically different about the structure of a mind that can do what no other mind has ever done? Remember that question, because someone eventually tried to answer it, and the way they got their hands on the brain is a story that still makes me sick. But first, I need to tell you about the 30 years between the miracle and his death. This part changes everything about what the brain discovery means. After 1905, Einstein produced the general theory of relativity. It might be the most beautiful intellectual achievement in human history. Gravity is not a force, it is a curvature. In space and time, he predicted things we would not confirm for a century. Black holes, gravitational waves, the expansion of the universe. And then he turned to a problem that consumed the rest of his life. He wanted one set of equations that described everything. Gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, all of it. A unified field theory. A theory of everything. He worked on it for 30 years. He never solved it. Colleagues would visit his office at Princeton and find pages of equations covering every surface. Einstein would look up, smile, and say he was getting closer. He said that for 30 years. Now here is what most people miss about this part of the story. Einstein did not fail because he got dumber. He did not lose his ability. He was applying the exact same quality that had made him see what no one else could see in 1905. The willingness to trust his own vision over the entire scientific establishment. In 1905, that quality made him a god. In the decades after, that same quality kept him alone in a room, working on a problem that might be impossible. The gift and the curse were the same thing. They are always the same thing. And I think about that every time someone tells me they want to find the source of genius inside a brain. Because if you found it, what exactly would you be looking at? The thing that let him rewrite the universe, or the thing that kept him chasing a ghost for 30 years? You cannot separate them. That is the part no microscope can show you. In April 1955, Einstein began experiencing severe abdominal pain. His aortic aneurysm, the same one surgeons had reinforced 7 years earlier, was failing. Within days, he was admitted to Princeton Hospital. The doctor said they could operate. Einstein refused, and what he said stays with me to this day. He said, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." Elegantly. That is the word he chose. Not peacefully. Not quietly. Elegantly. The man thought about the aesthetics of his own death the way he thought about the aesthetics of an equation. His son, Hans Albert, came. His stepdaughter, Margot, was there. Friends visited. And Einstein kept working. In the hospital bed, with a pencil and yellow notepaper, he was writing equations, the unified field theory. 30 years in, still reaching. The nurses later found 9 pages of unfinished calculations on his bedside table. The last page ended mid-equation. His hand could not hold the pencil anymore, but his mind was still trying. In the early morning hours of April 18th, Albert Einstein spoke his final words. They were in German. The night nurse did not speak German. She heard every syllable. She understood nothing. The last thoughts of the greatest mind in modern history are gone, spoken into a room where no one could receive them. I think about that more than I should. A mind that spoke to the entire world for 50 years. That changed how every human being understands space and time. And in the final moment, it returned to its mother tongue, and the words disappeared. His body was cremated that afternoon. His ashes were scattered in secret, exactly as he wished, but not all of him made it to the fire. Now listen carefully, because this is where the story turns into something I still cannot believe actually happened. A pathologist named Thomas Harvey performed the autopsy at Princeton Hospital. He was not a neuroscientist. He was not a brain researcher. He was the pathologist on call. And during the procedure, without asking Einstein's family, and without respecting Einstein's explicit wish to be cremated completely, Harvey removed the brain. He just took it. The most famous brain in human history. He put it in a jar and walked out. When Hans Albert found out, he was furious. But Harvey made a pitch. He said, "We will never get another chance to study the brain of a genius like this." He promised it would only be used for science. He promised the results would be published in serious journals. Hans Albert, against everything he felt, said yes. And that decision started 50 years of chaos. Harvey cut the brain into 240 pieces. He photographed it. He made microscope slides. Then, instead of sending it to a research institution, he kept it, in his possession, personally. And this is where it gets bizarre. Harvey lost his job at Princeton. The brain went with him. He moved to Wichita, Kansas. The brain sat in a cider box under a beer cooler. A journalist found him there in 1978 and could not believe what he was seeing. The brain of relativity, under a beer cooler in Kansas. Harvey moved again to Missouri, then back to Kansas. He lost his medical license after failing a competency exam. He took a job at a plastics factory and lived in a second-floor apartment next to a gas station. Einstein's brain was in the closet. Over the years, he would occasionally slice off a piece and mail it to someone. A few sections went to California. Some went to Canada, smuggled across the border in a cookie jar. He gave a chunk to a Japanese professor who asked politely. He showed jars of brain to his co-workers at the factory. The man who stole the most important brain in history had no idea what to do with it. For 50 years. And the whole time, the question sat there, inside those 240 pieces. What made Einstein Einstein? Was the answer hidden in the tissue, in the folds, in the cells? Now the part you have been waiting for. What did they actually find? The first study took 30 years. It was not published until 1985. A neuroscientist at Berkeley named Marion Diamond finally examined sections that Harvey had mailed her. She found that certain regions of Einstein's brain had more glial cells than normal. Glial cells support neurons. They keep them oxygenated. More glial cells could mean faster processing, better support, higher performance. The difference was statistically significant in one specific area, the left inferior parietal lobe. This is the region responsible for mathematical reasoning and spatial thinking. In 1999, a study in The Lancet examined photographs Harvey had taken of the whole brain before cutting it apart. They found something strange. A groove called the Sylvian fissure was partially missing. This meant the neurons in Einstein's parietal lobe were more densely packed than normal, closer together, potentially allowing faster connections between the regions that handle exactly the kind of thinking Einstein was famous for. In 2012, more differences appeared. Extra folds in his frontal lobe, unusual asymmetries, structural variations in regions linked to abstract thought and visualization. So I am going to ask you the question that everyone asks, and I am going to give you the answer that no one wants to hear. Did they find the source of his genius? No, they did not. And here is why. Every brain is different. The folds, the grooves, the cell ratios, they vary from person to person like fingerprints. To know whether Einstein's differences caused his genius, you would need hundreds of genius-level brains to compare. No one has them. No one ever will. But there is a deeper problem, and this is the part that keeps me up at night. The brain shapes the mind. Everyone accepts that. But the mind also shapes the brain. 76 years of thinking the way Einstein thought, years of visualizing curved space-time, years of imagining himself riding a beam of light. That kind of sustained, obsessive thinking physically changes the structure of a brain. So what the scientists found might be the cause of his genius, or it might be the result of his genius. The effect of a lifetime spent thinking thoughts that no other brain had ever attempted. Which direction did the arrow go? From brain to genius, or from genius to brain? No one knows, and I believe no one will ever know. Here is what I know. I stood in front of Albert Einstein when I was 22 years old. I watched something happen behind those eyes that I have never seen in any other human being. Not in von Neumann, who could calculate faster than any machine ever built. Not in Dirac, who heard music and the mathematics of the universe. Not in Oppenheimer, who could hold the entire project to build an atomic bomb inside his head. Einstein was different from all of them, and not because his brain had more glial cells or denser neurons, or missing grooves. He was different because he could look at the universe the way a child looks at something for the first time. No assumptions, no habits, no fear of being wrong. He once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. I thought it was a nice thing to say. Now, decades later, I think it might be the most important sentence in the history of science. They cut his brain into 240 pieces. They drove it across America in a cardboard box. They stained it and sliced it and photographed it and published papers about it. And they still could not find what made him Einstein. Because what he had was not in the tissue. It was not in the cells. It was not in the structure. It was in the looking. And when he died, and he spoke his last words in German to a nurse who could not understand him, maybe that was the final lesson from the greatest mind I ever knew. The important things cannot be captured, not by equations, not by microscopes, not by a pathologist with a jar and 50 years of obsession. They can only be witnessed, and then they are gone.